If today's celebrity news cycle feels unusually chaotic, that is because every single story circulating right now is hitting a completely different nerve at the exact same time, and the internet cannot decide which one to be outraged about first. One story is built on suspicion so thick you can almost taste it. Another is built on the kind of betrayal that makes people rethink every favor they have ever done for a friend. Another is built on grief, judgment, and the uncomfortable question of who exactly gets to decide what healing is supposed to look like when the entire world is watching. And by the end of this roundup, we are right back in familiar rap war territory, where wealth, ego, and old grudges are doing what they always do, turning a single comment into a full-blown spectacle that refuses to die. So buckle in, because what you are about to hear is not just a recap. It is a map of how modern celebrity culture actually works, why these 4 stories exploded at the exact same moment, and what they reveal about the audience watching them. Let's start with the moment that sent social media straight into full conspiracy mode, because Blueface managed to create a viral firestorm without even trying, and the internet is still trying to figure out what actually happened. Blueface was on stream, the chat was moving fast the way it always does when he goes live, and viewers kept pushing the same idea into the conversation over and over again. That Blueface girlfriend, Nivea, may have done some kind of spiritual work on him. Not a joke, not a punchline, a serious, whispered, repeated accusation that kept surfacing no matter how many times it got shut down. Then came the moment that made the clip absolutely take off. Blueface reacted to something on screen, connected it to a bowl of chicken noodle soup, and suddenly the internet had exactly what it loves most. A confusing, meme-ready fragment that can be replayed, reinterpreted, screenshotted, and argued about for hours on end. Now, to be perfectly clear, a viral reaction is not proof of anything. A person looking shocked on camera does not confirm witchcraft, spiritual manipulation, root work, or any other dramatic theory that people rush to attach to celebrity relationships the second something looks strange. But online culture does not run on patience. It does not run on evidence. It runs on implication, insinuation, and the thrill of connecting dots that may not actually connect. And once viewers started tying that clip to previous chatter about spiritual practices, the conversation moved lightning fast from, what did Blueface mean, to what is really going on behind the scenes of this relationship. That jump right there, that leap from question to accusation, is exactly where these stories catch fire and become impossible to extinguish. Part of why this blew up the way it did is because celebrity audiences rarely treat a live stream like a random moment anymore. They treat it like courtroom evidence. Every pause matters. Every facial expression becomes a clue. Every half-formed sentence gets turned into a full-blown narrative with a beginning, middle, and end that the person on camera never actually intended to tell. So when Blueface appeared genuinely disturbed by whatever he saw on that screen, viewers did not just watch the clip and move on. They began building a theory around it in real time, in the comments, in the reposts, in the reaction videos that started flooding every platform within hours. And once spiritual language enters the conversation, things get even more combustible than they already were. Online audiences tend to flatten everything into extremes. Either they mock it as complete nonsense unworthy of a serious discussion, or they present it like a secret weapon that has been used against Blueface without his knowledge or consent. There is almost never room for nuance, cultural context, tradition, family history, regional belief systems, or the simple possibility that viewers watching from their phones do not actually know enough to speak with real authority on any of it. That is exactly why these conversations become so messy so fast. What begins as one person reacting on stream can transform, in a matter of hours, into strangers debating religion, ancestry, danger, manipulation, morality, and free will, all in the same comment section, all with the same level of aggressive confidence. Whether Blueface was joking, trolling, genuinely unsettled, or simply caught off guard by something completely unrelated, the clip worked because it left just enough uncertainty to keep the machine running. And uncertainty, make no mistake, is incredibly profitable in the modern attention economy. Certainty ends the conversation. Ambiguity multiplies it. Ambiguity is what keeps a clip trending for 3 days instead of 3 hours. Ambiguity is what turns a moment into a movement. And Blueface, whether he intended to or not, delivered a masterclass in ambiguity that afternoon. There is also something worth pointing out about the specific relationship dynamics being dragged into this conversation. Blueface's romantic life has been public for years. Every partner he has been associated with has been dissected, judged, memed, and sometimes vilified by an audience that acts like it is entitled to a full behind-the-scenes documentary at all times. So when a new name enters the picture, and when speculation about spiritual influence gets attached to that name, The audience is not starting from neutral. They are starting from a pattern they think they already recognize. And once a pattern feels familiar, people stop asking questions and start assigning roles. That same exact pattern shows up in the next story too, but in a completely different form, with completely different emotional stakes, and completely different implications for how the public reacts. Finesse 2 times spoke out publicly about a legal situation involving someone named Shug, and the way Finesse 2 times told the story immediately triggered the kind of public reaction that only comes when people hear an account that sounds fundamentally unfair on its face. According to Finesse 2 times, he believed he was taking a charge in a way that was supposed to help Shug, based on advice he says he received from lawyers who were supposedly working in everybody's best interest. But then Finesse 2 times described walking out of court only to be placed in handcuffs over the very same matter he thought had already been resolved. If that account is accurate, and that is a significant if that deserves to be acknowledged, you can absolutely understand why people latched onto one specific feeling, setup. Not just disappointment, not just confusion, not just frustration with the legal system. Setup. Because in the public imagination, few story types travel faster or hit harder than the one where somebody thinks they are making a real sacrifice for another person, only to realize the consequences still came back to them anyway, and the person they were trying to protect walked away clean. That is the emotional engine driving this entire conversation. The story is not only about court procedure. It is not only about paperwork. It is not only about legal strategy. It is about a brutal social lesson that people think they already recognize from their own lives. Being the one who keeps it real can leave you holding the entire bag while everybody else walks away. That phrase survives in celebrity culture because it mirrors ordinary life in ways that feel painful and familiar. People see versions of this exact dynamic in family disputes, in friendships that fall apart, in workplace politics, and in romantic relationships that end badly. Do a favor. Trust a promise. Assume the situation will resolve one way. Then find out the cost did not actually disappear. It just quietly changed direction and landed on your shoulders instead. Of course, as with any legal dispute told in a short public statement, there are enormous gaps in what the audience actually knows. Viewers rarely receive the full paperwork. They rarely see the full timeline. They rarely hear every strategic detail behind what actually happened inside that courtroom. But that rarely slows the reaction down by even a second. When a celebrity frames an event as betrayal, the audience instinctively begins sorting the cast of characters into categories. Who looks used, who looks protected, who looks naive, who looks guilty, who looks calculating, and who looks like they absolutely should have known better than to trust the wrong person. That instinct to moralize every single headline, to assign blame within seconds of hearing a story, is exactly what makes the next story so interesting, because Tyrese pushed directly against that instinct in a way that most celebrities never bother to try. In discussing how quickly he appeared to move into another relationship after his ex-wife, Tyrese made a point that cut cleanly through the usual internet script and left a lot of people uncomfortable. Tyrese argued that healing is not a standardized performance. Healing is not supposed to follow a public timetable set by strangers on the internet. And healing does not have to resemble anybody else's coping process to be legitimate, real, or valid. That argument lands with real weight because so many people watching have personally witnessed the way grief gets policed in modern culture. There is always somebody standing by, ready to decide what the right amount of time is supposed to be. There is always somebody ready to tell you what the right amount of visible sadness looks like. There is always somebody ready to explain the right kind of public behavior in the wake of loss. And there is always somebody ready to declare when a person is finally allowed to seek comfort, companionship, or new love without being publicly accused of moving on too fast or disrespecting whoever came before. Tyrese's response pushed back directly on that entire framework and refused to apologize for it. Tyrese essentially drew a firm boundary around something deeply personal. Pain may become public through no fault of your own, but recovery is not automatically public property just because the pain was visible. That is exactly why Tyrese's comments resonated far beyond the usual celebrity gossip cycle. Whether people ultimately agreed with Tyrese or disagreed with Tyrese, they recognized the larger issue underneath. Everyone wants empathy for their own healing process. Everyone wants grace during their own hardest moments. But somehow, many of those same people become impossibly strict judges of everybody else's healing timeline the second the story is not their own. And there is another reason this topic hits harder than it first appears. When audiences talk about moving on too fast, they often act like time itself is the only variable that matters. But time is not the only variable, and pretending it is reveals a shallow understanding of how human beings actually process loss. Support systems matter enormously. Personality matters. Faith matters. Loneliness matters. Practical reality matters. Financial pressure matters. Family structure matters. Some people need silence to heal. Some need constant routine. Some need family surrounding them at all hours. Some need prayer and spiritual community. Some need to leave the country entirely and find a completely new environment. Some need companionship immediately because being left alone with grief feels physically unbearable in a way outsiders cannot understand. None of those paths automatically prove emotional health, and none of them automatically prove emotional dysfunction. They are just different survival strategies for different human beings. That is where Tyrese's remarks became something more than just a defense of his own choices. Tyrese's remarks became a direct challenge to a culture that often mistakes casual observation for genuine authority. Seeing the timeline from the outside is not the same as understanding the person living it. Watching the headline scroll across your phone is not the same as knowing the process behind the headline. And judging a stranger's healing based on a photograph or a red carpet appearance is not the same as having any real information about what that person is actually going through in private. There is one more layer worth naming here, because it explains why Tyrese specifically knew he needed to speak up. Tyrese has been in the public eye for decades. Tyrese has watched other men in his industry get destroyed by the exact same conversation he is now facing. Tyrese has seen how quickly a healing narrative can be twisted into a disrespect narrative, how quickly private companionship gets reframed as public betrayal, and how quickly grief-adjacent romance becomes tabloid fuel. So when Tyrese decided to defend his timeline out loud, he was not just defending himself. He was pushing back on a pattern he has watched consume people around him for years. Now let's shift from introspection back to open conflict, because the Rick Ross and 50 Cent back and forth is exactly the kind of feud that never really disappears from public conversation. It just quietly waits for a fresh spark, a new provocation, or a slow news week that gives it room to breathe again. This time, the exchange picked up around the performance of wealth, the authenticity of status, and the old rap world question of who is really living what they claim to be living on camera. The latest friction between Rick Ross and 50 Cent came with comments and mockery that turned a luxury property flex into yet another round of public ridicule, screenshots, and clapbacks. That right there is what makes this specific feud so durable, so recyclable, and so impossible to permanently end. Neither Rick Ross nor 50 Cent argues on only one level at a time. The insults are never actually just about money. They are about legitimacy. They are about identity. They are about who is authentically who they claim to be. If Rick Ross shows off a mansion, 50 Cent immediately questions whether it is really Rick Ross's mansion in the way it is being presented to the public. If Rick Ross talks streaming numbers, 50 Cent immediately questions whether those numbers translate into any real-world business power that a person can actually verify. Every single boast gets met with a counter-narrative, and every counter-narrative gets met with another counter-narrative, and the cycle never actually reaches a conclusion. And Rick Ross, for his part, leaned hard into a message that goes way beyond just one enemy. Rick Ross framed streaming numbers, business visibility, and consumer products as a real test of whether industry statistics are actually believable in the first place. In other words, if an artist claims massive success on paper, where is the broader empire that success should have produced? Where are the side businesses? Where is the visible infrastructure? Where is the actual proof that the music numbers translate into business results the audience can see with their own eyes, on shelves, in restaurants, on billboards, in ownership stakes people can verify? That argument matters way more than it might sound at first, because it taps directly into a much bigger cultural suspicion that goes far beyond one rap feud. Audiences across every industry have become increasingly skeptical of metrics they cannot personally verify. Streams, charts, first-week placements, trend cycles, viral moments. Regular people hear the numbers, but they do not always trust the machinery producing those numbers. So when Rick Ross openly questions inflation, streaming visibility, and the actual translation from music success into real business success, Rick Ross is not just talking to one rival. Rick Ross is speaking directly into a public mood that is already deeply primed to doubt whatever it is being sold on paper. At the same time, there is a trap embedded in talking too much during a feud like this one, and both sides know it. The more you explain, the more openings you accidentally create for the other side to exploit. The more you insist on your own reality, the more raw material you hand your opponent to work with against you later. That is exactly why these exchanges so often become performances of overexposure, where the person doing the most talking ends up losing simply by talking too much. Winning a public feud is not always about having the better facts. Sometimes it is about making the other person look like they are trying way too hard to prove something that should have been obvious in the first place. And that may actually be the most useful thread quietly connecting every single story in this roundup, if you slow down long enough to see it. Blueface clip exploded because uncertainty created a theory vacuum that viewers rushed to fill. Finesse 2 times account gained massive traction because sacrifice and betrayal are instantly legible emotions that anybody can recognize. Tyrese broke through the noise because Tyrese challenged the public's assumed entitlement to judge private pain from the outside. And Rick Ross versus 50 Cent keeps surviving decade after decade because both men understand, on a deep instinctive level, that modern celebrity conflict is not actually about being right. It is about controlling the frame. Who gets framed as paranoid? Who gets framed as loyal? Who gets framed as exploited? Who gets framed as self-righteous? Who gets framed as authentic? Who gets framed as fake? Who gets framed as the victim? Who gets framed as the villain? Once the frame sticks in the public mind, every new detail that emerges gets automatically interpreted through that frame, whether the frame is accurate or not, whether the frame is fair or not, whether the frame is complete or not. And that is exactly why celebrity commentary remains so addictive to audiences even when the underlying facts are incomplete or contradictory. People are not only tracking events as they happen, people are tracking story roles as they get assigned in real time. Viewers want to know who is becoming the victim, who is becoming the villain, who is becoming the truth teller, who is becoming the manipulator, and who is becoming the punchline that everybody laughs at for the next 6 months. Look at how each of these 4 stories quietly hands out those exact roles without anybody explicitly announcing them. Blueface either becomes the victim of something spiritual or becomes a person too gullible to recognize a joke. Nivea either becomes the mysterious influence behind the curtain or becomes an innocent girlfriend unfairly dragged into a viral cycle she never asked to be part of. Finesse 2 times either becomes the loyal friend who took the fall or becomes a person who misunderstood his own legal situation from the beginning. Shug either becomes the beneficiary of somebody else's sacrifice or becomes a person unfairly accused of exploiting a friendship. Tyrese either becomes a man defending his right to heal or becomes a man rationalizing behavior he cannot fully justify. Rick Ross either becomes the businessman speaking uncomfortable truths or becomes the rival stretching too hard for a comeback line. 50 Cent either becomes the master strategist controlling the narrative or becomes the aging antagonist recycling old material. Every one of those framings is available to the audience simultaneously, and the audience gets to pick which one they believe based almost entirely on which framing they hear first, which framing they hear loudest, and which framing lines up most neatly with whatever they already suspected before the story even broke. So here is the question that ties all of this together, and it is a question worth actually sitting with for a moment. When a celebrity story starts spiraling online the way these 4 are spiraling right now, what actually moves the audience more? Real proof or effective framing? Is it the hard evidence that shifts opinion at scale, or is it the first emotionally compelling narrative that people hear and repeat before anybody else even gets a chance to define the moment on their own terms? Because if the answer really is framing, and history suggests it usually is, then the most powerful person in any public controversy is not always the one with the best case on paper. It may simply be the one who tells the most memorable story first, loudest, and with the most confidence, regardless of whether that story is complete, accurate, or fair to everyone involved. And that is exactly why none of these stories are actually done yet, no matter how much people want to move on to the next thing. The Blueface conversation will keep mutating for weeks as long as clips continue to circulate without proper context. The Finesse 2 times fallout will keep generating fresh reactions as long as people feel the imbalance in the way Finesse 2 times described his own situation. The Tyrese debate will stay alive because viewers will always project themselves into questions of grief, love, timing, and moral obligation. And Rick Ross versus 50 Cent? That feud will breathe again the very second either side decides one more line, one more post, one more interview clip is worth another round of public warfare. There is also a bigger picture worth acknowledging before we wrap this up, because it matters more than any single story here. All 4 of these situations reveal something about the audience that consumes them, not just the celebrities inside them. Blueface stream became a mirror for how quickly viewers assign supernatural explanations to human confusion. Finesse 2 times court story became a mirror for how deeply people already distrust the systems around them. Tyrese's healing defense became a mirror for how much unresolved grief the audience is carrying and projecting onto strangers. And the Rick Ross versus 50 Cent feud became a mirror for how skeptical people have become of any success they cannot personally verify with their own eyes. Celebrity culture never really was about the celebrities. It was always about the audience using famous people as screens onto which regular people project their own suspicions, their own fears, their own grief, and their own frustrations with a world that often feels like it is being sold to them on false pretenses. That is why these 4 stories exploded at the same time. Not because they are connected on the surface, but because they are all connected underneath, at the level of what audiences are quietly hungry to talk about. Blueface gave people permission to talk about influence, control, and the fear of being manipulated by someone close to you. Finesse 2 times gave people permission to talk about loyalty, sacrifice, and the sickening feeling of realizing you were the one holding the bag. Tyrese gave people permission to talk about grief, timing, and the exhausting experience of being judged by strangers who have no idea what you have been through. Rick Ross and 50 Cent gave people permission to talk about wealth, legitimacy, and the growing suspicion that not everything shiny is actually real. For stories. For completely different textures. One underlying truth. Modern celebrity news is really a running conversation about trust. Who deserves it? Who has lost it? Who is faking it? And who is quietly earning it back one moment at a time when nobody is watching closely enough to notice. So now the real question comes back to you, because you are the one deciding how these stories move next. Which story here feels the most misunderstood by the internet right now? Blueface and the stream reaction that triggered all the spiritual speculation. The Finesse 2 times legal complaint that has everybody screaming set up. Tyrese's defense of his healing timeline against a public that will not stop watching the clock. Or the latest Rick Ross and 50 Cent exchange that reopened a decade of unfinished business. And more importantly, which one of these 4 do you actually think gets worse once the internet keeps doing what the internet always does? Turning fragments into facts, opinions into verdicts, and speculation into settled history? Drop your take below and be honest about it, because this entire news cycle feels like it is exactly one update away from getting significantly louder. One more Blueface clip. One more Finesse 2 times courtroom detail. One more Tyrese interview. One more Rick Ross versus 50 Cent flex. And every single one of these stories jumps another level, drags in more people, and locks in framings that are going to be very hard to undo later. That is the part nobody talks about enough. Stories like these do not just entertain. They set precedents. They train the audience on what to expect next time. They teach the internet how to react the next time a live stream gets weird, the next time a rapper walks out of court, the next time a widower is spotted with somebody new, and the next time 2 industry titans decide to trade shots in public. Every cycle teaches the next cycle how to move faster, hit harder, and stick longer. So watch these 4 stories closely, because they are not just news. They are training data for the culture you are going to be living inside 6 months from now. And the frames that stick from this week will absolutely shape how the next round of celebrity chaos gets processed the moment it drops. Blueface is not done. Finesse 2 times is not done. Tyrese is not done. Rick Ross and 50 Cent are absolutely not done. And neither is the audience watching all 4 of them at once, waiting for the next spark to justify the next explosion. Tell me which story you think detonates first. Tell me which framing you believe. Tell me which celebrity you actually trust in their own version of events. And tell me which one of these 4 situations you think will still be getting talked about a month from now, because at least one of them will, and the internet has already started deciding which one that is going to be. Cold open, burst. Stop me if you've heard this one. A 4-year-old girl blows out her candles, blows a wish, and her father is not in the room. The reason he is not in the room is the part you have to hear to believe. The mother of that little girl went on a live stream, told the chat she had hired armed security for the venue, and said those guards had been instructed to physically lay him out if he tried to walk through the gate. The father responded by going entirely silent for the rest of the day. He did not call. He did not FaceTime. He did not dial his own father, who was sitting 10 feet from the birthday girl, and say happy birthday through that family line. He just let the day pass. And then, only after the comment sections had already buried him, he tossed a single 2-sentence shout-out onto his own broadcast and moved on. That is the state of play on the Blueface and Jaden Alexis situation right now, and the receipts are all still up. Hey y'all, pour something out, pull up a seat, and buckle in. We walk through what Jaden Alexis actually said, what Blueface actually did in response, what Papa Blue, that is Jonathan Porter Sr., Blueface father, said on his own timeline, and how a sweet little girl named Pink Face ended up at the center of the most viral family ugliness Blueface has been part of since the Krisian era kicked off. No filler. Just receipts. Let me plant the part of this story nobody is saying out loud, but everybody is thinking. A grown man allowed a toddler's birthday lunch to become a public cage match. The mother of the birthday girl put a price tag on the party's front door, then wrapped that door in armed security language, and the father of the birthday girl responded by going dark. He skipped the lunch. He skipped the call. He skipped the gift. He skipped the post. He then tried to retroactively fix the optics with a single shout-out on his own broadcast, and the chat read him for it in real time. That is the box this weekend has become, and the box is still open. Stay with me, because once you see how this birthday was actually planned, the way it unfolded is going to make your stomach turn. We are going to walk through Jaden Alexis's broadcast, what she said about the security, the dollar demand she tied to Pinkface's attendance list, the response Blueface put on his own stream, the message Papa Blue dropped on his timeline before the candles were even lit, and the moment at that lunch table where a 4-year-old girl realized her dad was not coming. We have it all on the record. Let's get into it. Before we get into the receipts, let's slow down on who is who, because the timeline keeps getting the names jumbled. Blueface is the rapper. His legal name is Jonathan Jamal Porter. His father is Jonathan Porter Sr., and he goes by Papa Blue online. Papa Blue digital creator modeling on his own page, posting real family content. Blueface's longtime partner is Jaden Alexis. Jaden Alexis is not a fling. Jaden Alexis is not a current era groupie. Jaden Alexis is Blueface's high school sweetheart. She is the mother of his older children, including the birthday girl herself, Journey Porter, who the internet has nicknamed Pinkface. Pinkface is 4. Pinkface just had a birthday lunch this weekend. Jaden Alexis threw it. Blueface was not on the guest list, and that is where the entire story actually starts. We are also going to name Carlisa, who is Blueface's grandmother. Carlisa was at the birthday. Carlisa was part of the family roll call at the table. And we are going to name Crizian Rock, the other well-documented chapter of Blueface's recent personal life, which produced a child named Crizian Jr. Crizian Rock is not the woman at this birthday, but Crizian Rock is part of the reason the internet keeps comparing how Blueface has shown up for that chapter of his life versus how Blueface has shown up for this one. We will get to that comparison in a minute. Alright, let's back the truck up. When the birthday plans started floating around, Jaden Alexis hopped on her own live stream and answered questions from her chat. During that broadcast, Jaden Alexis laid out her condition in plain terms. She said Blueface was welcome to attend Pinkface's birthday lunch, but only if Blueface paid 50% of the cost of the party. That is a public number. That is a live stream number. That is a number delivered on camera, with her face on the screen, and the clip is still floating on the timeline. Jaden Alexis did not bury it. Jaden Alexis did not put it in a private text. Jaden Alexis put the 50% line in front of her chat, in front of the entire internet, and let the comment sections argue about whether the line was reasonable, whether the line was coercive, or whether the line was simply the adults acting like adults on a stage that should not have been a stage. Now here is why that price tag matters more than it looks. When Jaden Alexis attached a dollar figure to Pinkface's birthday lunch, she turned a private parental question into a public parental question. Instead of opening a private conversation between two parents about